starting off with a topic that has become a hot topic all over the world, not even just in technology anymore. I'm Heather VanCura. I work at Oracle. I'm director there, chair of the Java community process. So we kind of covered a little bit of that yesterday and in the session. Today, I'm not going to be talking about the JCP at all. I'm actually talking about a different topic, women in technology. So I feel that I'm in a bit of a unique position to talk about this topic based on my role traveling all around the world working with the Java developer community for the last 17 years. I can't believe it's been that long, but it actually has. And this talk really came about due to the fact, and Yolande and I were talking about that this morning, was the fact that men actually started to approach me probably over the last 3 to 4 years is when it really started to happen. When men would approach me asking, what can we do about the fact that there aren't more women in technology, and particularly in the Java community? And so that became increasingly one of, I would say, the top 5 questions that I would get when I traveled around the world and met with developers. And so the idea with this talk is that I would stop talking about the issue and really give some concrete ways that men can take actions to support that goal of having more women in technology and being able to work with more women in the Java community. So that was, I guess, the genesis of that talk and how I came about this talk. And really that's because I have been working in technology for 20 years now, but I hardly ever recognized that in the beginning. So this isn't really a topic that has been burning on my mind for a long time, but as I said, it's something that people started to come to me with, and I started to recognize it as an important issue, and the fact that I really think this is an uncomfortable topic, even for me as a woman. It's kind of uncomfortable to talk about this topic, but the fact that the Java community is so warm and open and welcoming and kind and generous, I feel like this is a safe space where we can talk about this topic and see what kind of things that we can do together to improve the situation. So there is, I think, where a lot of the confusion comes and why people sometimes don't, in Java particularly, want to talk about the issue of why aren't there more women in the community is the fact that there is this fallacy that people believe that tech is a meritocracy. And I can say that I truly felt that was the case when I first started working, especially with the Java developer community. And I hardly even recognized at first that I was one of the only women. I really just put my head down and worked hard and figured I would just get recognized for the work that I was doing. But in reality, that is not the case. And really, that's not the case for anybody, especially working in technology. You have to be phenomenal at your job just to survive. But if you want to thrive, particularly if you're a woman, you need to be looking at ways that you can grow your network, increase your visibility, expand your influence. In order to do those things, you need sponsors, mentors, and allies. And I think that's true for all people working in technology, but I think it's particularly true for women. So I think that's part of the problem when people start to talk about it is tech is based on code. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or anything like that. What is your race? It doesn't matter. It's all about the code. And that's not necessarily true. So in my talk, oftentimes I get approached about we should really get more girls into technology. We should be doing kids who code events and all kind of those things, which I do think are important, and I am part of those initiatives. But for this talk, it's the top 10 ways, and we're going to talk about women, not girls. So just for this talk, top 10 ways you can help women. And the first tip I'll go ahead and start with and walk through this. I think this is a really key one and kind of the premise of this talk, right? This talk is about action. So first thing you can do is shift your mindset from thinking of ally as a noun, something that you are, to a verb, something that you do. So it's something that you do sometimes, not a thing that you are. So try to think about specific actions that you can take as I walk through this talk, and think how you can act on them sometimes. And I think you also have to be aware when we talk about this topic that you have to be open and be willing to listen, and that it is intersectional. So every person's experience is going to be different based on not only their gender, but also their their race, their sexual orientation, their ability. So all of these things help with any group that's underrepresented in technology, right? So these are all things that you can do to help any of those types of people where we don't have the representation that we have of other groups, and that every person's experience is going to be different based on all of these factors. So you really need to be willing to listen and be open and empathize with the other person's situation. And I think another problem that can sometimes happen is that we approach this with the idea of being maybe a little bit sarcastic or trying to use humor in these cases, which, as you know, if you spent any time with me, I'm a big fan of humor and I love to laugh. But as you approach some of these situations, it's really best to just be open and straightforward. Use simple language, be kind. Number 3, assignment distribution. So I think this is one of the most common reasons that women who are in technology choose to leave technology is thinking about assignment distribution. So women not thinking that they're not receiving the prime assignments in the team. So I think in every field there are certain tasks that are more like housework and some where it's the real work. And I think, a key one in technology is managing the code versus writing the code. A lot of women that I've talked to in technology come to me and say they're often asked to do kind of making things look pretty, do the slideware, those kinds of tasks. So it's not just housework in terms of cleaning up the conference room in a meeting, but thinking about the prime assignments. So what are the assignments that are going to get the most visibility within your team, and making sure that you have people on your team, both men and women, who are getting those prime assignments, because those kind of assignments that give you that visibility as a woman or an underrepresented group to management and help you to help women to succeed in their career. So I think it's really important to be aware in your projects of who's getting assigned those prime opportunities. And I think that's a way that we can continue to see women grow in their career. Number 4 is creating a friendly environment. So as I mentioned just a second ago, women do leave the technology field at a rate of close to 47% versus men leaving the tech field at a rate of about 15%. So there's something in the culture that is pushing women out. So even the women that do get into tech are often pushed out. And I think creating a friendly environment is something that we can do, that everyone can do on the team in order to make all people feel comfortable. So oftentimes some of the feedback I get from women is if they're at a conference, people will approach them and assume that they're not a technical person, that they're maybe there as a spouse or a girlfriend, or they must be in marketing. So I think coming with the approach that if someone's at a conference, they're probably there to be technical is a good way to approach it. And also thinking about asking them questions about their work, right? So people sometimes, men say they don't know what to say to women or what to talk about, so they'll kind of revert to relating to them as maybe other women that they have in their life, like their partner or their sister or their mother. So think about them as a person and a peer and ask them questions about their work. And you'll find that we really are more similar than we are different. But I think focusing on the work is a great way to do it. In your office environment, creating a friendly environment and one that where people all feel welcome can also get into some of the kind of the more informal areas. So oftentimes you'll see like beer pong or, let's have some beers after work. So oftentimes some of the women on the team won't be included in those types of activities because either they don't want to partake in the beer or the alcohol, or they have other obligations outside of work. So I like to think about ways that you can kind of mix that up. So doing things at lunchtime, like lunchtime brown bags, or doing activities. So something, if you're finding that certain people on your team aren't participating in those after hours activities, which is really where you come together as a team, where you're building that network, you really need to look at ways that you can be more inclusive in doing that. I think also in terms of the job descriptions, this also comes into play in terms of creating a friendly environment, one that everyone feels welcome. So you see those job descriptions for rockstar, coder, ninja, all-star. Most of the women that I've talked to would not consider themselves a rock star or a ninja. So think about it in terms of the description that you would put out there, and what is the atmosphere too? Are you going to describe it as, we're here partying, kind of creating that atmosphere of which might be a party kind of atmosphere, which might be appealing to certain types of programmers, but maybe it's not appealing to all different types of groups. So if you're not getting the applicants coming in to you that you want in terms of the diversity, which is often a concern that people bring to me as hiring managers, that women just aren't applying for the jobs. Think about the way that you're describing your environment, and is it a friendly and inclusive environment? Number 5, speak up. This is speaking up at meetings, at conferences, and forums online. So we talked about forums online yesterday. I think Josh was talking about that, right? So I think this is a key place where men can speak up. Women too. I think all people can do these things, but there are a couple of different scenarios that often happen in all of these venues, which is, if people realize that a woman is making a suggestion, they oftentimes will talk over it or not hear it, and then you'll see maybe like a couple minutes later, someone else will make a similar suggestion, and all of a sudden everyone at the team grabs onto that idea, and the woman who initially had started it doesn't get credit for that idea. And I actually have done a little bit of research into that and found that men don't hear certain tones and auditory. So they really often don't hear these suggestions. So something that you can do, which I think term I like to use is amplify it. So if you're in a situation like this and you see this happening, this is when you can speak up. So if someone makes an idea and it's kind of falling on deaf ears or isn't heard or isn't picked up, maybe amplify on that idea, and recognize the person. So, Michelle just suggested we do this, and what if we add this on top of it? What do you think of that? So that's a way to speak up in that situation and not allow that to happen. I always encourage women to do that for themselves as well, but oftentimes maybe it's just not as effective. So this is a way that you can step up and take an action in that case. And the other example that I like to show on this slide is interrupting. So I think it's really similar there. So a woman being interrupted. Personally, I don't like to see interruptions for a man or a woman, and I often run into this chairing the JCP meetings because we have 30 people who all want to talk at the same time, right? So kind of coordinating that and letting people know that I want to hear from a certain party before the next party starts talking. So I think you can do this in meetings as well, at conferences, on conference calls. You can step in and say, I don't think that Katie was finished. I don't think that Catherine was finished. Let's hear what she had to say. So I think those are great examples of times when you can speak up and really make a difference. Tip number 6 is a little bit different in terms of intervening during difficult situations. As I mentioned earlier, I have been involved in the Java community for a long time, and I go to many, many Java developer conferences, and I have not personally had any really uncomfortable, extreme situations, but unfortunately, I have heard from some women that they do. So I think one of the things that men can do, especially when you see something inappropriate or see a woman who's uncomfortable, step in. I think oftentimes men will tell me that they would never do any of these inappropriate situations, and this doesn't apply to them, but it's not enough to just be silent. If you see someone who's uncomfortable in a situation, step in and redirect. It doesn't even have to be a confrontational type of action. It can be just a simple redirection into a topic that's more comfortable or moving to a separate area. So intervening is really key here, and I think redirection is important, and just remembering it's not enough to be silent in these kinds of situations. We need men stepping up. Number 7 is character traits, and I think this one probably applies more to me than any other of my 10 tips. Character assignment. So there are certain character traits that are different when they apply to a man or a woman. And I don't think that should be the case, but in reality, that is the case. So this is where I think I first started realizing that tech is not really a true meritocracy, because I would as a woman, mirror the behavior of men around me. I would do exactly what they were doing, but what I got in terms of feedback was that I was being perceived as bossy or aggressive or abrasive, sometimes cold. And I would say, I'm just doing the same thing that everyone around me is doing, and that's human nature, right? We mimic each other. But it is perceived differently. There are certain traits that are perceived differently. So if you're a strong, independent person, as a man, that's a great trait as a leader. Maybe as a woman, you're perceived as being too bossy or too aggressive, too ambitious, abrasive, for instance. So I actually looked into this word abrasive. There's some studies on performance reviews. This comes into play especially. So abrasive is a word that it comes up in performance reviews of women time and time again, and it's just not a word that we use for men at all. There really isn't another word that you would substitute for that. So I think if you can just be aware of that with people on your team, or if you hear people describing women's behavior and using any of these types of words, to suggest some different words. Strong instead of bossy, right? So consider that. Oh, what do I have here? Tightrope, prove it and prove it again. So there's the phenomenon, I think, for women that puts them in this situation with the tightrope is you're trying to be feminine enough to be likable, but not feminine enough to be effective, and masculine, not too masculine so you wouldn't be likable, right? So it's sometimes you feel a little bit like you're on a tightrope as a woman. So consider that when you're thinking about the character traits that you would apply to women. Okay, number 8, level the playing field. So I think part of the meritocracy theme that I brought up earlier is the norms to succeed in technology. In order to succeed in technology, you need to be promoting your work, and you need to negotiate. And negotiation, not just for salary, but for the projects that you're going to work on. So I think it's really important to tell people up front that they need to do this, right? So as one of your ally actions can be to communicate this, that in order to succeed in technology, you need to be able to promote yourself and the work that you're doing, and you need to be negotiating your salary, and also negotiating for the assignments that you receive. Really key there to do those things to succeed, but you can also step in and highlight women's work or other groups that aren't getting represented well in the tech space. So step in and acknowledge that work. It only takes a little bit of extra effort to do that, to tell someone higher in your management chain that you appreciate the work that the person on your team has been doing. And that will go a long way for them to expand their career and continue to grow and to stay in technology. Number 9, educate yourself about unconscious bias. I'm not going to go into too much detail about unconscious bias because Yolande's going to talk about that in a few minutes, and I'm going to wrap up with my tips. But my tip for number 9, unconscious bias is a thing that we all have. And again, this is something that I've had to acknowledge myself, is that I have unconscious bias. I bring in certain expectations of people as human beings. This is our biology, that we have so much information coming in, we have to put it in boxes and categorize it. It's just something that we do. But to be aware of the bias that we do have, and to think about what people are doing and how we're processing that information. But another way to educate yourself is also to think about mentoring someone who's different from you. I think with the current environment of all the sexual harassment claims that are coming up, it becomes even increasingly more difficult for men to sometimes justify be willing to take the risk of mentoring someone different from them. But it's really important to think about ways that you can do this. So not only are you going to be helping the person that you're mentoring, but you're going to be learning quite a bit. You're going to be expanding your horizons. You're going to learn a tremendous amount. So, and for women too, just know all of my mentors have been men. So a lot of men and women sometimes think that women want female mentors, and that's really not the case. So we need to be mentoring other people who are different from us. It's easy to gravitate to someone who's just like you, but you're both going to get a lot more out of the situation if you're looking for someone who's different from you. Number 10, support and encourage women speakers. So this is when I talk about, think about something that you can actually do. So pay women, follow women, invite women, encourage them to apply for jobs. So the jobs that are out there, oftentimes women just need that extra encouragement to apply for the job. They think they need all of the requirements in the job description to even apply, and that's not the case. Same thing for speaking. You don't need to be the top of your field and an expert to present on something. One of the best ways to learn about a topic is to actually just go in and prepare a talk for it, right? So you don't need to be an expert. But I think just saying that the call for papers is open to all people isn't enough as conference organizers. So I know Chris has done a great job here. We have a lot of women attendees. We have women speakers. But that is due to the fact that you don't just put it out there as open. You have to actually, as a conference organizer, as a hiring manager, go out there and approach women and ask them to submit. So I think a lot of people have started to do this more recently rather than just say, oh, it's open, anyone can apply. Actually go out there and ask a specific woman to present. And if for whatever reason that person doesn't want to, a great way to start as a speaker is to do a presentation at a small Java user group or present with a more experienced speaker. So co-speaking is great. You can do it together. It can be a little bit more comfortable for a newer speaker. I put this up here because, you know, here's me, all these guys. This is like the story of my life. And it's really great to see more women in the Java community. So this is changing. So the things that we're doing are working, maybe not fast enough. I think number of people working in technical jobs all over the world is 17% women, which clearly isn't enough. Women are 52% of the population. The technology that we're creating is affecting all people, and it's just a fact that the solutions that women come up with are going to be different than the solutions that men come up with. And solutions and teams with people including men, women, all different diverse types of groups, they actually create better solutions, better products. They're more profitable, they're more creative, they're more innovative. Their collective intelligence actually rises in teams with diversity. So it's something that will make a difference in the world, and it's something that you can do to impact change. So you're here listening to my talk, which is awesome, first thing in the day. You will make mistakes. You will maybe not get credit that you think you should be given if you try to take some of these actions, but go ahead and keep doing it. You are making a difference, and we can be the change that we wish to see in this industry by taking all of these actions that I gave you today. You can follow me on Twitter, but my goal for you today is, I'm out of my slide. Can you go back? Do you want Take one action that I gave you, even if it's just following one of the women that you know on your team, following one of the women that are here in this room today. If you're looking on the live stream, you know, follow Yolande, follow me, follow the women on your team. So that's one of the actions that's simple that you can do in 2 seconds. Okay. Okay, so our next segment, we're going to talk about some of the things that we're doing for women in technology in the Java community, right? So Yolande is going to
I'm just
start that up.
There. Okay.
Yeah, and we both have mics, so we'll just switch places.
And I hit the wrong button. There we go. No. View. Presenters. Slideshow. What am I supposed to do? Presenters view? No?
Yeah, it's there. It's up now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Perfect.
Oh. Okay, so I'm Yolande Poirier, and I do...
You come over here.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like, everyone can see you.
My leash is here.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm Yolande Poirier. I also work at Oracle, but in a slightly different role. I'm a community manager for Java. And so I manage a lot of the online channels and also attend conferences, Java conferences, but very focused on Java. So the discussions that I have more around women is that I'm part of a network with of women in Java. And so often the discussion I have is I have people coming to me and say, most of them will be women, and I'll say, well, what can I do? Which network exists? So how can I actually create a network for myself that works for me as a woman? But before I want to get into all of this, I want you to think. I want you to think first. Imagine that you are at a doctor's office and you go to the emergency room. and you have this excruciating headache, and you think that you're going to die, and you don't know who is going to be your doctor. So if a doctor comes and he is in his 50s, he has gray hair, you're probably going to relax and think that he's probably he had a case with exactly what you have today, and he's going to save your life, right? So, but if you get a very young doctor, you're probably going to think, oh, he's young, maybe he probably doesn't know what he's doing. So you are going to start like checking on everything that he's doing, right? And you're going to try to help him and to make sure that he's going to give you like the proper care, right? So when we think about bias, I want you to think about like assumptions, and I try to find like other type of words so to describe that, but it's something that you do all the time, right? You don't really have a lot of information in general. I have a little equation, hold on, tick here at the bottom. There. So most of the time what happens is that you have limited information. So, and you are pressed by time. So even when you build a product, you're going to, when you decide on certain features for a product, you're probably thinking, well, I should have thought about that like 6 months ago. And so you always pressed by time, and you really don't know, even when you developed your product, like what kind of, you don't have all the information. You don't know what will work in 6 months or a year. So you're constantly in this situation where you make decisions with limited information, with a lot of judgment or assumptions. And so we function very well in that environment. That's how we process all the information and make all the decisions like day in and day out. So when we think about minorities, so if we think about a smaller group that is not exactly like us, we tend also to make enormous amount of assumptions. So like, for example, the example that I gave you with the doctors, I mean, maybe the older doctor had like plenty of lawsuits because he was really a bad doctor. You really have no idea. And this young doctor may be very thorough and actually a good doctor, but you don't know, right? So you make those quick judgments. And so when we think about, so how can you really make sure that you don't have too many biases? And one way is very similar to what you do to test software, right? You do a unit test, you test the idea that is presented to you. You can always check if that idea actually makes sense. And you can also think about like the implementation afterwards. Can this person really implement the idea that was given, right? What is her track record? And so forth. So that's how you can really check and make sure that you're not just like functioning automatically, taking shortcuts and just making judgments. Like a lot of the situation that we see is that sometimes men are just not really aware of this, they don't even realize that they are functioning with biases, because they just think, oh yeah, sure, I mean, this person looks okay, and they just do it by I would say quick judgments than really a thorough thinking of what this person should be delivering. So, it's the same thing in the hiring process, right? You would love to hire your friends because the assumptions is that you can get along with them really well, and but as we all know, and we probably had at least one experience like that, is that you don't necessarily want to hire your friends because they have a very different way. For example, a deadline means a very different thing for them, and then you cannot really work with them. So it's something to be really aware of, because I remember at Oracle when I started talking about women issues, my manager just said, well, I never thought about it, right? And so often this is just the world we live in, is that if you're not a minority, if you're not a woman, you don't really realize like what the circumstances are. So, oops, press the wrong button. Okay. So this was a panel discussion that we did a couple of years ago, and they're all very well-known speakers. So Trisha Gee, Amelia, I forgot her name. Catherine, that she does the Vox interviews, and Ikshal. So they're all very technical, and they were discussing in this panel like how they wish it was a meritocracy, like you described, Heather, that code just mattered, that it didn't matter who wrote the code, but the reality is just not the case. And so they find themselves in a situation where they became a role model, but really by necessity, not really because they want to. They don't really want to talk to about women issues. They just want to talk about technology and improve their career. And every time it's actually difficult for me to get them to even talk about women issues, because they're like, no, we don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about the technology and something else. So it's important to understand that they're very uncomfortable as well, like talking about women in technology. So this is me with Linda in the middle and Regina. They both created the Duchess organization, and they're very active today. We celebrated the 10-year anniversary. Actually, the first picture I have on the slides was the gathering for the 10-year anniversary. It was just like in November at Devox, Belgium. And the Duchess is it's really just like a framework or just a website where you can actually create your own chapters. So what we recommend every time we meet women who want to create something, we ask them to create like something in their local jugs, for example, like tied it to jugs or in where they are, because it's every situation is a little bit different, and women need really to create like a network for themselves. And I think often because they are isolated at work, so they also tend to be isolated also and not really connected to the rest of the Java community. I pulled those data because I manage like some of the big social media channels. So like, for example, Facebook and Twitter have over like 300,000 followers, and YouTube as well have about 65 members as well. So, and the trend is about 15, a little bit, yeah, about 10 to 15% are actually online are women in participating in those channels. It's about it's a little better than it was a couple of years ago, but it's increasing really slowly. So there is definitely an issue. So one of the recommendations when we talk about the Duchess's organization is really to join user groups, because first of all, you can, as a woman, you could really help the user group attract more women. So so some groups have actually, they would create like just a meeting, a Duchess meeting right before the user group meeting, the regular user group. And so what it does is so the more women then come to the user group, because otherwise they just don't go to those meetings. Maybe because they're uncomfortable, maybe because they don't see the reason why they should actually be more connected and have more of a network. So it's something simple to do, and that benefits really the entire community. Linda, if you go to the Duchess.org website, you will see that she's offering new speakers mentoring. So she is also like sharing a lot of the CFPs for a bunch of Java conferences. And she has the buddy program, which is very simple, but she matches women of similar interest at conferences. And and it's just to make sure that more women go to conferences and have somebody else to talk to and share. And so those meetings are very, it's very casual, and it's just based on interest. It's not even like necessarily very focused on the women issues per se. And I think that's a big takeaway in the community in general, is that it's really trying to make sure that people have opportunities, but not really singling out women or women issues and talking that way. So we really like try as much as possible to pull everybody together, so it benefits men and women. So they also organize hands-on labs. So those are local. They are based in the Netherlands, and this is their little. So it's Duke, and so that's why the Duchess is just the female version of Duke. They're also very involved with Devox for Kids. So those are like kids events that are organized really around the world. But they so the Duchesses in the Netherlands are also very active in that. So if you go to devoxforkids.org website, you'll find like training for, and so enough training so you can run your own workshop as well for kids. The Duchesses in France are very active. They've been doing like a mentoring program, so they call it Adopt a Duchess, which is kind of funny. But they do that in it's very simple the way they implement that. They basically ask the mentees and the mentors to fill out a form on Google, and then they match people, so based on their interest and what they want to learn. So sometimes we look for like complicated tools, but I mean all the technology is really out there. And the result is they have a lot of women actually who are also speaking. And so it's great to have the speaker bureau, because not only they promote themselves, so there is and if you click on each profile, you will see also where they speak and so forth. And so, but it's also easy for anybody to reach out to them and to invite them to events. So they're very involved in France and very active in France, but they're not necessarily like international speakers. Some of them are, like Amira. I know she also spoke in the US. But so ideally, this would be like what we need really in for every country. So when we do events, so this is the Oracle Code event. So it's a series of one-day event that Oracle is organizing, and you have all the cities here. So because this event is a little bit like a more developer day, so it's not deep dives into technologies, and we are trying to recruit people who are more local as well, and women. So we have an event coming up in Paris, so I'm going to make sure to reach out to some of the women. But you see how my job becomes easy, because I already have a list of women I can reach out to, right? And like Heather mentioned it as well, but it's very important to actually reach out to women so they become speakers. Otherwise, they may actually not take the first step. So as much as possible in all the programs that we are doing, we're trying to actually get more women involved. So this is like a series of pictures of Java 1. We organized a developer day right before Java 1 this year, and it was on the Sunday before. And we had several, so Mercedes is in the corner there speaking. And we also had 2 and 3 hours panels with women talking about, issues and and also what they do, like mentoring and so forth. So, night hacking. So Steven is here and is doing the night hacking recording, so everything is going to the night hacking channels. But we do this also at conferences, and this is a picture of a panel, again, like different women talking about how to progress your career if you're a woman, so giving tips really. But the stage as well is is we often ask people to do also the interviews, so they can come to us and say, well, I would like to interview a series of people, and we would welcome that as well. So we do that. So most of the time we have men or Heather, who volunteers a lot. But other than that, very few women take on that opportunity as well. And in the corner there, if you wondering, this is Trish, who came with a young daughter. And she asked me if she could come on the panel with her daughter, and I'm like, well, that's the whole point, is how do you manage, right, to have a family and then go to conferences and do your job and so forth. And so she handles this very well. One of the big tip that she gave, actually, that people really liked in this interview, was that, well, if you're really in conflict and your job is not working, just move on. Just go and get another job. And that's applicable. So all the tips that were discussed here were actually also tips that are relevant for men as well. Another thing that we do is, so there is the Java magazine. You probably know the magazine that Oracle puts together. So we recruit writers as well, and we also try to get women to write articles. I manage the websites. So this is an online magazine, but we also have like a website where we have articles as well. And so if you reach out to me, for example, I'll give you we can discuss a topic and to write articles. But I'm always looking for women also to make sure that, because I've seen it so many times with men, is that someone will write an article, start presenting at Java 1, and before you know it, they actually they either get a promotion at their current job, or they find another job and with a much better position. So it happens very quickly, and I think often the women don't realize that it's not that hard. So, but you have to take those opportunities and make sure it works for you. And finally, we manage also the Java Champion program, and we are also trying so this was a picture from last year at Devox US. So a lot of people are friends of the family as well. So, but we also encourage women to join the program. So once they've done a couple of things, I mean, if they are known in the community, they do community work, they write something, or they do a workshop, for example, with kids, and a series of things, then they start being well known and they can become a champion. So not too difficult. And that was my last slide.
Last slide. All right. We're 15 minutes to spare, so we can have discussion, comments, questions.
Yeah.
If anyone has any. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. No. Oh, Ian has a question.
Yep. So it was great to learn about the J. Duchess organization. That was certainly news to me. Are they active in the U.S. or is it mostly in Europe?
So there is a chapter also in the U.S. So there are chapters around the world, really. I could even show you the. But they have chapters in Africa.
Guatemala. Mercedes started one in Guatemala. I think she talked about that yesterday. We're talking about starting one here, right?
Right. We had our first meeting last night.
Last night in my room, it all happened.
Yep. I tweeted about that on Java.
Right.
So this is the website, the jduchess.org website, and so you can see all the chapters here. So
there was one in San Francisco before, but it's kind of I think they're looking for a leader right now.
Yep.
So
it's possible.
If you know anyone that would be interested in picking that up, I know we've both gone to a few of those events in San Francisco.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a great resource if you're looking for people, applicants, or for speakers if you're organizing a conference, or if you want to do a talk and have someone to present with you. Or to mentor someone, right?
So and you'll see that they have like very different channels. So it's really like similar to jogs. I mean, they just decide what they want to do. Some have websites, some don't. I mean, so it's really really customized to the local community and whatever issues they have. Because if you look at India and Europe, that may be totally different. And so on the side here is what I was talking about is Linda is actually sharing a lot of the call for papers and also encouraging people to present. And if someone has a question or they don't know what to do, so they are easy to find and then to connect with, and they'll give advice on how to start.
One more question on the numbers you presented on the distribution of men and women across the different Java channels and social media. What determines the Java channel nature of that? I mean, those metrics look like great things for us as a community to work on improving. I'm just kind of curious, if we go out and try and do more advocacy for those Java channels, what was the criteria for selecting a Java channel, like across
Was
the
it just
beaches?
at Java?
Right. So it's just the channels that because I was looking for like overall channels. Metrics for the Java community, and I couldn't really find it. Right. It's always women in IT and some areas. I know that database they have, for example, like 35% women, so it's not all applicable. So I just took the channels that I had and that were available, and I could just look at metrics.
Okay.
So but I think they are the biggest one in Java.
No, totally. I think it's great. I mean, it's great to have numbers that we can maybe try and move the needle on a bit there.
Right.
That's great.
Well,
Thank
it
you.
is interesting too that it's pretty similar. The Java channels on the social media is similar to what you see in terms of technical roles overall across the world. And that's what I've found going to all the conferences is that even conferences that have a higher percentage of women, you see all the same issues come up time and time again. There's different variances in different cultures. Like we were talking about the panel I did in Tokyo last year, and I was in Morocco last year as well, and we had some discussion about it. So I've had these discussions all around the world, and though there are variances in the cultures, the same issues come up time and time and time and again. And, a lot of times people do call it women's issues. I call it it's a societal issue, right? So increasingly, unfortunately, I think a lot of the reason why men start to care is they're at that age where they're actually having daughters, and they think like, oh, it'd be cool if my daughter had this opportunity. It feels like maybe she wouldn't have this opportunity, and they feel like a vested interest. But then at that point, they're like, but what can I do? And that's where it becomes like, there are huge things that could be done, macro changes, but micro changes are things that any person can do working in this space to make a difference. Even the little changes all add up to make a difference. One follower, one person speaking with you, one person on your team. So, and when you are hiring, I think it's important not just have one woman applicant. They say in terms of behavioral research is like you need 3 women. Otherwise, you're just putting that person in a category as the woman. But once you get past 2 and you have 3 of any category of person, it's really just focused on that uniqueness of that person versus they're this person in that category. They're the black person, they're the woman or whatever. So that's a really important thing to consider.
Right. I think in general it's really also diversity, right? So we talk about women, but it's also a diversity issue.
So I have like 2 things. First, like the practical parts, and Heather, like the number 10 from your slide, which is trying to encourage women speakers. I help run a couple of meetup groups in Kansas City. Like, do you know of any good Twitter feeds or Twitter channels for getting women speakers? Because it's very difficult to find speakers, and I guess that's the first part of the question. You know of any good speakers in the Midwest area or good channels to go to?
I think there are some speakers in the Midwest area, and I think that is the most effective way is to find that person and go invite them. But there's like Callback Women, which is a call for speakers channel for women that a lot of women follow once they have started down that path of being a speaker. Because like Yolande said, once you start taking that first step, you write an article, you do that first talk or whatever, it all just happens. Like even we were talking about last night with our women that we met up with, is like, once you start speaking, you're going to get invited more, and you're going to do it more, and you're going to become more confident. It's like taking that first step. So Callback Women is a great Twitter channel.
Okay.
I have a list, a Twitter list, which is Women Who Java. So under my Heather VC account, I have a Women Who Java list,
Me too.
which has members there that you can look at in terms of finding people. But I think using that Callback Women is great for people who've already decided that they want to be presenting at conferences, and they will travel to different conferences, but finding people in your local area, it's going to be a matter of just going out and reaching out to that person. And that can often be the step if they've thought about doing a talk, just having someone say, I'd really like you to present. And say, what would you like to talk about? Or give them a topic that you want them to talk about. Even that can help. Like, I want you to come and talk about this. That would push them to take that step and be a speaker. And then once they get started, it will just kind of snowball on from there.
And sometimes
And he had another part of this question, but you have something to add. Okay.
Just a little thing to add is, like, when you talk to women, you have to insist a little bit more and really like encourage them to do something, right? Whatever it is. So find their passion and make sure that you insist. You say, no, you can do it, because send really that message. I think.
Yeah, and you kind of really led it right into like my second part of my question is, it's like, I do wonder how, because like I don't want to be like, oh, I only want you to speak because you're a woman, because like that just seems very offensive, but it's also at the same time, I guess if I don't do anything, then we're not going to have any women. I don't know. I'm trying to weigh that, because like I've been starting to recently listen to Greater Than Code, the podcast, and like they've had a couple of people on there that kind of like women they were interviewing that kind of spoke to that. But it is providing great opportunity, and then to people in the audience, they don't necessarily know that. They're just like, oh, Mercedes is up here, giving a great presentation. So I don't know. I'm just.
Right.
I
I definitely wouldn't say, like, I want you to speak because you're a woman. Like,
Right.
No, yeah.
I hope you
absolutely,
wouldn't want
yeah.
any woman there. Like, you want her to
Absolutely.
speak because she has knowledge about a topic, right? You wouldn't invite
Yeah.
the woman on the street to come to your conference because she's a woman, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
And most
obviously,
women
yeah.
won't want to talk there if that's why you tell them you want them to be there.
No, yeah,
Right.
I understand. I'm just trying to wonder how to properly bring it up.
So I think if you have like a setup, you running a jog, right? You said, yeah. So for example, if you have a model where at the beginning of your jog, you allow people to just present for 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be
So
great.
and then you make sure that women are included in that process. So you know so there is that. There are panels. So I think it's that first step, right?
Yeah.
So if you can ease that first step and you get a woman to speak with somebody else, for example, or so, and since you have a jog, that's a perfect opportunity because it's a small group and they will feel more comfortable doing that.
No, yeah,
That's
that's a great idea. The 5-minute early thing, because sometimes it's hard to put together like that full presentation. Sometimes people just have like one thing, like I found this one cool thing.
Mm-hmm. And often it's just like they do research or they solve a problem at work. And so you could ask them, well, so what is the last thing that you learn about, right? And they'll certainly come up with something, because often as well is that there is this we kind of freeze. We say, well, because everybody sees like those the top presenters, right? And so it's very intimidating. But if you frame it very casually, then you'll have definitely a lot of diversity.
Yeah, I think the thing that especially like the Atlanta Jug does is work closely with their Women Who Code local chapter. So I don't know if you have one nearby, but you can kind of collaborate with them and get people to come to your Jug to be members. And then the thing in Johannesburg in South Africa, the thing that I've done 2 years in a row now is a whole like day of Ignite talks by women. So in technical talks by women, only women, and the audience is, their primary members, really, they have mostly men who are members of the Jug, but they reach out to the broader community and say, hey, we're having a conference today, and all 5-minute talks, mostly first-time speakers. So that's something that you could do in coordination with your local Women Who Code, or if there's another, group that meets, you can kind of do collaboration. That's a good place to look for additional speakers.
And if you have a couple of women joining your meetings already, then direct them to J Dutches and ask them to, because that will bring them more visibility globally as well. I mean, and then once you have them, the example I gave, right? If they do a little meetup right before your jogs, then immediately they will attract more women, because a lot of women, are just isolated, right?
Yeah.
And they don't see really a reason why they should go. It's an extra step. So, and if you can make that easier, same thing, will happen.
Great, thanks. That's a lot of great suggestions. I'll definitely try.
We
to
should
take
add
them
that
on.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Add that into the talk, because this is the first time we've done this talk. So.
Right. We had not seen each other's talk.
Good talk.
So give us feedback or whatever. I think.
Yes.
Do we have any time? Not really. 2 minutes. Any other thoughts?
Take your time.
Comments?
Take as much time as you want.
Feedback, comments to
Yeah.
share?
Comments?
Anything.
Okay. No.
Well, thanks for that.
All right then.
A
Thank
lot.
you.